It happened on a Thursday. No press conference. No headline. Just a quiet line of text buried in a government document. China had just lifted tariffs on 134 U.S. products, including medical devices, industrial chemicals, and, most notably, semiconductors. The move was labeled a temporary exemption, but the timing raised questions. It came right after Chinese state media aired a series of speeches declaring economic independence from the West. It came as nationalist influencers posted videos smashing iPhones and calling for a boycott of American brands. So what does it mean when a government says one thing and quietly does the opposite? On TikTok, they shout, "We don't need America," but in Beijing, someone just reopened the back door and rolled out a red carpet for U.S. imports. Not because they want to, because they have to. The slogan says, "We're strong." The numbers say, "We're sinking." In April 2025, China lifted tariffs on 134 U.S. products. That's not rumor. That's not speculation. That's policy, quietly announced on a Thursday night. Included in the exemption list: semiconductor components, aerospace parts, industrial machinery, certain medical technologies. Together, these items represent core infrastructure for China's export industries and domestic health systems. So why now? Because China's numbers are unraveling. In April, the country's PMI fell to 49.0. That means contraction. It's the lowest since late 2023. In Q1 2025, GDP still showed growth, 5.4%. But international banks aren't buying it. Goldman Sachs, UBS, and IMF all revised their 2025 full-year forecasts to just 3.5%. Meanwhile, youth unemployment remains over 21%, and Beijing has stopped publishing the data. Now look closer. What happens when exports stall, investment dries up, and consumer confidence collapses? You need lifelines, and that's exactly what the tariff rollback was. A hidden economic lifeline. China imports most of its high-value chips from the US, Japan, and Germany. Despite years of self-reliance campaigns, Beijing still relies on foreign suppliers for advanced tech, especially for EVs, robotics, AI, and clean energy storage. Without those inputs, domestic industries stall. Exports collapse. Factories shut down. And the real fear: social instability. Beijing saw it coming. In Q4 2024, protests related to wage arrears and mass layoffs surged by 41%. In manufacturing hubs like Guangdong, Sichuan, and Hubei, thousands of workers clashed with police. Videos of the unrest spread briefly online before disappearing. Now connect the dots. You can't build chips if your machines are from Holland and your software is from California. You can't make EVs without foreign lithium processors and power conversion modules. You can't protect supply chains when ports are half empty and ships leave without cargo. But you also can't admit defeat. So what do? You lift tariffs quietly. You allow U.S. goods back in under the radar. You give companies breathing room but forbid them from speaking. It's not policy transparency. It's tactical retreat. A reset without headlines. A concession without debate. A shift without admission. What's breaking isn't just GDP. It's narrative control. China spent years projecting strength, technological, industrial, ideological. Now it's unspooling those threads in silence. And for a regime built on performance and pride, that silence is louder than any speech. The Chinese government says it's strong, self-reliant, unbothered by Western pressure. But the tariff exemption tells another story. Let's walk through the contradiction. On television, Beijing says, "We won't bow to American economic coercion." But inside official trade documents, they just opened the gates for over 130 U.S. product lines, products that China cannot yet replace. Why exempt semiconductors? Because China needs them. Because local chipmakers still lack the capacity to deliver quality at scale. Because U.S. firms like Qualcomm, Texas Instruments, and Analog Devices remain irreplaceable. Why exempt aerospace parts? Because the C919 aircraft project, meant to rival Boeing, relies on GE engines and Honeywell control systems. Why exempt medical imaging systems? Because China's hospitals can't fully operate without Philips, Siemens, and GE diagnostic tech. But none of this is shown to the public. When the exemption list was published, it was not front-page news. It was buried on page 6 of an economic appendix. No minister gave a speech. No analyst went on TV. It was announced with a whisper because a headline would mean admitting failure. On Weibo, search terms like tariff exemption, US chips back in, and economic retreat were restricted within hours. Even private posts discussing the exemptions were flagged or deleted. Official media, silent. The line remained. China is winning the trade war. But if you're winning, why invite your opponent back in? There's another layer. Several Chinese academics had warned for years. China's dual circulation strategy, building internal consumption while reducing foreign dependence, couldn't succeed without real technological substitution. But Beijing didn't wait for results. It launched the slogans first. And now reality is catching up. Behind the scenes, foreign chambers of commerce were notified of the tariff rollback before Chinese citizens were. Foreign exporters were given guidelines. Domestic manufacturers left to guess. The truth is simple. China cannot afford a clean break. Not yet. So it plays both games. One face for the people, defiant. Another for the market, compliant. This isn't just economic. It's existential. Because if citizens discover that their leaders are surrendering strategically, without telling them, faith erodes. And once trust is gone, slogans can't hold the weight. This wasn't a trade compromise. It was a carefully staged retreat. One Beijing didn't announce, because it wasn't theirs to control. From the beginning, China thought the battlefield was about tariffs, tax codes, containers, customs. But the real front was elsewhere. Invisible. Strategic. The US never forced negotiations. It simply started with holding oxygen. First came export controls on semiconductor tools. Then came license freezes on critical software. One by one, pieces of China's industrial backbone were tightened, not destroyed, just quietly limited. It wasn't an explosion. It was suffocation. And as pressure mounted, China didn't fall. It unraveled. Factories kept running but had no parts. R&D centers kept hiring but couldn't prototype. State subsidies increased, but returns collapsed. Beijing didn't call it defeat. They called it adjustment. But in truth, it was an economic backstep scripted by external logic. This is the twist no one mentions. The rollback of tariffs wasn't a domestic strategy. It was the only escape left. Because to maintain the illusion of control, Beijing had to avoid direct talks. No stage, no signing, no concessions. Instead, they folded inward. One policy at a time, one item at a time. The exemption list became a silent signal. We'll let your goods in. Just don't make us admit we need them. No negotiation. No face lost publicly. But control, already surrendered. This is not China bending. It's China retreating to a space carved out by American pressure, designed to look voluntary. And in that space, tariffs weren't just lowered. They were dismantled by silence. The first signs were subtle. Small notices appeared on factory gates. Production paused due to supply shortage. Please await further instructions. No explanation. No dates. No blame. Inside, the truth was clearer. Orders had dried up. Chip deliveries were inconsistent. Imports were stuck in customs, no tariff code, no clearance. After Beijing quietly lifted duties on US goods, factories expected relief. But it didn't come fast enough. And for some, it came too late. In Zhejiang, an EV battery supplier closed 2 workshops. In Dongguan, a robotics firm dismissed 400 workers. In Tianjin, a smart appliance assembler halted 3 production lines. These weren't speculative ventures. These were pillar industries, backed by the government, celebrated in state media. Now, empty halls, stacks of unused parts, shadows on concrete. Then came the layoffs, but not with fanfare, not with outrage, just slow disappearances. a middle manager, a procurement officer, a team of 26 engineers, gone in one Friday memo. One worker described it like this: "You show up, your ID doesn't scan. They tell you IT is checking something. You know what it means, but no one says it." In Chengdu, an optical lens factory cut its workforce by 60%. One technician who had worked there for 11 years posted a single sentence: "My badge doesn't work. That's all." The post was removed within hours. Worse than being fired was being replaced. In some provinces, state firms received quiet instructions: hire contract workers only, no benefits, no insurance. When asked why, supervisors gave the same line: temporary adjustment due to external market fluctuations. That phrase repeated itself in reports, in meetings, in HR emails. A mask for something deeper: systemic paralysis. Because even when production resumed, it was partial. Stop-start schedules, reduced quotas, no innovation. Companies that once chased next-gen tech now begged for basic survival. The deeper tragedy? These were the lucky ones. They had jobs, even if temporary, even if invisible. In rural counties, small suppliers weren't just laying off. They were vanishing. One tool and die factory in Anhui tried to pivot to motorcycle parts. Another in Jiangxi attempted drone casing for agriculture. Both shut down within 90 days. No announcements, just shuttered windows, debt collectors standing at the door. When factories fell silent, cities did not follow immediately. Not at first, but slowly, predictably, the rot spread. In Chongqing, a metro station known for funneling 80,000 workers per day now sees half that number. Cafes that once lined the industrial parks now serve no one. One owner left a note taped to the glass: "Open from 6 to 11, unless no one comes." In Suzhou, apartment blocks built for high-tech engineers now sit half-vacant. Property managers stopped turning on hallway lights. Trash collection slowed. Deliveries became rare. Families began to contract. Young couples postponed weddings. Fertility clinics reported a drop in new appointments. Preschools began merging classrooms, not for efficiency, but survival. In Sichuan, a mother recorded a short clip: an empty fridge, a bag of rice. Her voice: "We were promised high-speed growth. My husband was promised 5 years of work. He got 5 months." The clip disappeared within the day. Local governments felt it next. Guangdong province delayed teacher salary bonuses. Hunan halted repairs on flood-damaged roads. Shaanxi cut grants for tech startups by 80%. Officials didn't blame Washington. They blamed budget rebalancing. But the cuts told a different story. A story of overextension. Of industries propped up by global access now reduced to internal panic. Online, the conversation shifted. The word collapse was still banned, but new words emerged: reorganizing, sidelined, relearning, each one a code, a whisper. One post gained traction before vanishing: "We were told to build a fortress. Now we rent space in our enemy's basement." Comments poured in, most of them gone within the hour. And what about the media? Still strong, still loud. They say, opening markets shows confidence. They say, flexibility is strength. But there's a difference between flexibility and folding in silence, between leadership and scrambling for air. Somewhere in this confusion, one fact remains: China lifted tariffs not because it wanted to, but because the system couldn't breathe. Not without US tech. Not without foreign parts. Not without a return, however silent, to the table they once swore they'd flipped. And for a country that claimed it had escaped Western control, that silence is the loudest proof of all. They didn't announce it. They didn't explain it. But they did it. The tariffs were lifted. The doors quietly opened. The dependence quietly admitted. Not because the US asked. Not because China lost a war. But because the system couldn't survive without a foreign heartbeat. Factories paused. Jobs vanished. And behind every data point was a government that had to act without telling the people why. They called it an adjustment. They said it was strategic. But the more silent the policy, the more visible the retreat. So now, with American semiconductors re-entering Chinese ports, and tariff barriers pulled down by invisible hands, one question remains: what do you really control, if even surrender must be hidden?